If peace is no longer an option, would you choose death or slavery? This isn't a distant hypothetical, but a question about the very core of the human condition, about survival, dignity, and the soul itself. If all hope was lost and all attempts at peace were exhausted, we are left with only two choices: death or slavery. I'll explain. Peace, at its root, is the absence of disturbance. Yet, disturbances are part of life. Events happen in our lives and in the world around us that destabilize us. One bad moment or one bad day is easy to manage. But when disturbances happen constantly, day after day, they begin to become normalized and life begins to feel like an existential threat. The same is true for societies, because societies are made up of individuals. If we look out into the society and all we see are the society's problems, people as problems, and just reality itself as a problem, then everything begins to feel like a battle just to exist. Most of the time, the loss of peace is a slow erosion. Even if the collapse seems sudden, there are warning signs that happen all along the way. Think about the 2008 financial crisis. To the average citizen, it probably seemed like it happened at an instant, but to those who knew the system, it was a long process of waiting for the bubble to pop. Just as societies can collapse under the weight of constant disturbances, so do we as individuals. Our perspective and proximity to the events will determine how much or how little we're impacted by them. When these breaking points come, they threaten our sense of security and safety and destabilize our mind. And in that destabilized mind, there's the possibility that we can lose our sense of self. Physical death is the end of a life. Spiritual death is the absence of living. It's a loss of meaning and purpose. Sure, you keep breathing, but you feel helpless, disconnected, and absent all peace. In the same way, slavery has two faces. We all know the physical form: the loss of freedom, the denial of agency, and the stripping of autonomy. But in modern times and throughout history, slavery has taken on a psychological or spiritual form. Things like addiction, self-deception, neglect, or avoidance are forms of spiritual or psychological slavery. These bind us into cycles where we are simultaneously in a paradox where we are both slave and master. We're simultaneously the one who is in control and the one who is subject to that control. But we must muster the will to rise up and challenge the way things are. The problem is that the longer we stay in this cycle, the weaker the will becomes, and the more hopeless we become with it. And the soul feels drained of vitality. Whether physical or spiritual, the cost of living without peace is the same: the loss of autonomy, the reduction of agency, and actions that often lead to meaningless outcomes. This is what makes peace, true peace, priceless. It allows us to live meaningful lives, and peace worth having will always be worth defending. So, how can we know when a line has been crossed, and when does a life without freedom stop being a life at all? And the answer is actually simple: when hope fades and all meaning is lost. For me, most of my life has been in this hopeless and meaningless cycle. My life has, in a large way, been shaped by this question of death and slavery. I was born into conflict. I spent half of my childhood as an orphan. I didn't finish 2 consecutive years at the same school until I was a junior in high school. I was raised on self-destructive patterns of behavior. I've been incarcerated, institutionalized. Against my will, I've been chemically sedated, and my consciousness has been shut down. It's a loss of autonomy that most people will never understand because you're not even subject to your own thoughts and mind. Rather, your body and mind become the subject of someone else's will. The majority of my life, I didn't even know that there was a possibility for something like internal peace. Most of what I knew for most of my life was that constant cycle of weakening the will and being hopeless. At some point, I had to look inward and recognize that I was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired, and that something had to change. I had to change. I recognized that my life lacked structure, morals, values, it lacked meaning, purpose. I had all of the freedom afforded to me by this land, but yet, through my own choices, I had become a victim of my own freedom, a victim of my own choices. I was bitter, emotionally isolated, angry, very walled off, anxious, and fearful. I lived in a constant state of reaction rather than a state of conscious action. And in an act of desperation, I decided that I was going to cut everything out of my life, everyone and everything. And I told myself, whatever happens next, whether you fail or succeed, you only have yourself to blame. Since then, some of what I've learned on the subject of death and slavery is this. Morals and values are a kind of freedom, but we have to willingly elect them. We have to choose to use them. When we do, they do less in the way of restricting us and more in the way of guiding us towards meaning and purpose. They liberate us from the distractions that pull us away from a sense of purpose. Fear enslaves us, but when we willingly confront it, we grow stronger and more resilient from it. And that resilience makes the disturbances of life less impactful to our peace. Courage and cowardice are two very different responses to the same exact feeling of fear. And once we begin to be honest with ourselves about the way we live life and the things we do, we can begin to trust ourselves. And from that sense of trust, we can build a sense of self-respect. And that self-respect compounded over time creates confidence. And then when we have the confidence and self-respect and trust in ourselves, we treat ourselves with a sense of dignity. And then this brings us a sense of peace. And at any point, we can choose this. Any of us can. There's always things inside our control and things outside of our control. The main thing we can always control is how we choose to react to the things that happen to us. The things of the past, the things of the present. How we choose to respond to those are always ours to choose. How we choose to live today determines what we will reflect on in the future. And so this makes all of our choices much more meaningful. Not every day is going to be a good day, but every day you can choose to see the good in the world. Even if the world seems like it's in a terrible state, something you can do immediately to change that is to recognize the good in humanity. And if that's too complicated, recognize the good in yourself and recognize that you are part of humanity. If you don't see the good in yourself, then you're choosing death and slavery. But if you choose to see the good, you're choosing life, freedom, and peace. Until next time, always stay up to no good.